Hello, fellow history lovers and English learners. Welcome back to our cozy archives for another journey through time and memory. Did you know that a man born in a tiny log cabin with a dirt floor would one day hold the destiny of a whole nation in his big, rough hands? Our story today is not just about a president. It is about a boy who had almost nothing except a great mind and a very kind heart. His name was Abraham Lincoln. He was born on a cold morning in February, 1809. The wind blew hard across the wild woods of Kentucky on that day. His parents, Thomas and Nancy, lived a very simple life. They were poor farmers who worked the land every single day. The world around them was full of tall trees and wild animals. It was a place where people had to be strong to survive. Young Abraham, or Abe, grew up in the quiet silence of the frontier. Life was very hard for his family. They had to clear the forest to plant corn. They had to build their own furniture from the wood they cut. Abe spent many hours helping his father. He learned how to use an axe before most children learned to write their names. By the time he was 7 years old, he was already strong for his age. His family moved from Kentucky to the state of Indiana when he was only 7. They hoped for a better life and better land. They traveled through the deep woods and over rocky hills. The journey was long and very tiring for the small boy. They finally settled in a place called Little Pigeon Creek. It was a wild area where the sun barely reached the ground through the thick leaves. Tragedy struck the small family very early. In 1818, when Abe was only 9 years old, his mother Nancy died. She became very sick from a local illness. This loss was a deep hole in the heart of the young boy. He loved his mother very much. She was the one who encouraged him to be kind and thoughtful. For a year, the cabin was a very sad and lonely place. Thomas Lincoln soon realized that his children needed a mother to care for them. He traveled back to Kentucky and married a woman named Sarah Bush Johnston. Sarah was a widow with 3 children of her own. She brought many things with her, like furniture and real blankets. More importantly, she brought love and energy back into the house. Sarah quickly grew to love Abe like her own son. Sarah saw something special in the tall, quiet boy. She noticed that he was always looking for something to read. In the wild frontier, books were more valuable than gold. Abe went to school for only a few months in total during his whole life. He often said his education was picked up by littles. He studied by the orange light of the fireplace late at night. He read every book he could find in the neighborhood. He read the Bible, Aesop's Fables, and the life of George Washington. He would walk many miles just to borrow a single book from a distant neighbor. He often wrote his notes on a wooden shovel with a piece of charcoal. When the shovel was full of words, he would shave it clean and start again. This was how he practiced his writing and his thinking. As Abe grew older, he became very tall. He reached a height of 6 feet and 4 inches. He was thin but incredibly strong. His arms were long, and his hands were powerful from years of farm work. People in the village began to notice him for more than just his height. He was a great storyteller. He could make people laugh or cry with the way he spoke. He was also known for his honesty. People started calling him Honest Abe. He worked many different jobs as a young man. He was a store clerk, a postmaster, and even a surveyor. He once walked many miles to return a few cents to a customer he had accidentally overcharged. This simple act of honesty stayed in the minds of the people forever. Chapter 1. The Tall Stranger in New Salem. In 1831, Abraham decided to start a new life in the village of New Salem, Illinois. He arrived there after a long trip down the Mississippi River on a flatboat. In New Salem, he worked in a small general store. This was where he really began to learn about people and politics. He listened to the men talk about the laws of the country. He realized that he wanted to do more than just sell sugar and nails. He wanted to help people and make the world better. He began to study law on his own. He did not go to a big university. He simply bought old law books and read them while he sat under a tree. He studied so hard that sometimes he forgot to eat. Abe was not just a scholar. He was also a leader. When a local war broke out with Native American tribes, he joined the volunteers. His fellow soldiers liked him so much that they elected him as their captain. He did not see any real combat, but he learned a lot about leading men. After the war, he ran for the state legislature of Illinois. He lost his first election, but he did not give up. He tried again 2 years later and won. He was only 25 years old. He wore a simple suit that was too short for his long legs. But when he spoke, everyone listened. He had a way of making complex ideas sound very simple and fair. During his time in New Salem, Abe fell in love with a young woman named Anne Rutledge. She was kind and beautiful. Many historians believe she was his first true love. Sadly, she died of a fever in 1835. Abe was heartbroken. He walked through the woods in deep sorrow for a long time. Some people feared he would never recover, but his strength of character helped him move forward. He moved to the city of Springfield to practice law. He became a successful lawyer because he was very good at explaining things to a jury. He used stories and humor to win his cases. He never tried to trick people. He always searched for the truth. In Springfield, Abe met a woman named Mary Todd. She was from a wealthy family in Kentucky and was very well educated. She was very different from Abe. She was short, and he was tall. She was temperamental, and he was usually very calm. They fell in love and were married in 1842. They had 4 sons together: Robert, Edward, William, and Thomas. Abe was a very loving father. He often let his boys play in his law office, even when they were messy and loud. He was not a strict parent. He wanted his children to feel free and happy. However, life brought more sadness to the family. 3 of their 4 sons died before they reached adulthood. Chapter 2. A House Divided Against Itself. Abraham Lincoln became more involved in national politics in the 1850s. The United States was facing a very big and dangerous problem. The northern states and the southern states were arguing about slavery. In the South, many people believed they had the right to own other human beings. In the North, more and more people thought slavery was a terrible evil. Lincoln hated slavery. He believed that every man had the right to the bread he earned with his own hands. He did not think the government should force the South to stop slavery immediately, but he did not want it to spread to new lands. He was worried that the country would split in half. In 1854, a new law was passed called the Kansas-Nebraska Act. This law allowed people in new territories to choose if they wanted slavery. This made Lincoln very angry. He felt that this law went against the ideas of the founders of the country. He joined a new political group called the Republican Party. He became a leading voice against the spread of slavery. In 1858, he ran for the United States Senate against a man named Stephen Douglas. The 2 men had a series of 7 famous debates. Thousands of people came to watch them speak in the open air. These debates made Lincoln famous all across the country. During one of his most famous speeches, Lincoln said something very important. He said that a house divided against itself cannot stand. He meant that the United States could not continue to be half slave and half free. He believed the country would eventually become all one thing or all the other. Even though he lost the election for the Senate, his words stayed in people's minds. He was invited to give a big speech in New York City in 1860. He spoke at a place called Cooper Union. He explained his ideas with such logic and power that the leaders in the East were amazed. They saw that this tall man from the West was a true leader. In 1860, the Republican Party chose Lincoln to be their candidate for president. The election was very tense. Many people in the South said that if Lincoln won, they would leave the United States. Lincoln campaigned on a platform of keeping the country together and stopping the spread of slavery. When the votes were counted, Lincoln won the election. He was now the 16th president of the United States. But he did not have time to celebrate. Even before he moved into the White House, Southern states began to leave the Union. They formed their own country called the Confederate States of America. The clouds of war were gathering over the land. Chapter 3. The Dark Clouds of the Great War. Lincoln traveled to Washington, D.C., in secret because there were many people who wanted to hurt him. He took the oath of office in March 1861. In his first speech as president, he spoke directly to the people of the South. He told them that they were not enemies, but friends. He said that the government would not attack them. He pleaded with them to remember their shared history. But his words were not enough to stop the anger. In April 1861, Confederate forces fired on a place called Fort Sumter in South Carolina. The American Civil War had begun. It was the saddest and most violent time in American history. The war was much longer and more terrible than anyone expected. Lincoln had to build a huge army very quickly. He had to find good generals who could lead the soldiers. This was very difficult for him. Many of the first generals were afraid to fight or made big mistakes. Lincoln spent many sleepless nights in the White House. He walked the halls with a heavy heart. He often visited the hospitals to talk to the wounded soldiers. He wrote letters to the mothers who had lost their sons. He felt the weight of every life lost on his shoulders. The war was tearing families apart, as brothers sometimes fought against brothers. In the middle of the war, in 1862, Lincoln's son Willie died of a fever. This was perhaps the hardest moment of his life. He was trying to lead a nation in war while his own heart was breaking. But he did not quit. He believed that the United States was a special experiment in freedom. He believed it was his duty to save the Union. He also began to realize that the war must have a higher purpose. He decided that he must end slavery forever. If the Union won the war, every person in the country must be free. This was a very bold and brave decision. On the first day of January, 1863, Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation. This was a very important paper. It declared that all people held as slaves in the areas of rebellion were now free. It did not end all slavery immediately, but it changed the meaning of the war. Now, the Union Army was not just fighting to keep the country together. They were fighting for human liberty. This encouraged many black men to join the Union Army. More than 180,000 black soldiers fought for the North. Their bravery helped turn the tide of the war in favor of the Union. Chapter 4. Words that Changed the World. One of the most famous moments in Lincoln's life happened in November 1863. A great battle had taken place in a small town called Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Thousands of soldiers had died there. A new cemetery was being opened to honor them. Lincoln was asked to say a few words at the ceremony. He followed a speaker who talked for 2 whole hours. When it was Lincoln's turn, he spoke for less than 3 minutes. He wore a black suit and a tall silk hat. He stood before the crowd and spoke with a voice that was clear and steady. This speech is now known as the Gettysburg Address. In his speech, Lincoln reminded the people why they were fighting. He said that the nation was born in liberty. He said that all men are created equal. He spoke about the brave soldiers who had given their lives. He said that the world would little note nor long remember what they said there, but it could never forget what the soldiers did there. He called for a new birth of freedom. He finished by saying that government of the people, by the people, and for the people, shall not perish from the earth. These few words became some of the most famous words ever spoken in English. They perfectly explained the American dream. As the war continued into 1864, Lincoln had to run for election again. Many people were tired of the war and the high cost of fighting. Some people wanted to make peace with the South and let them keep their slaves. Lincoln refused. He believed that the work must be finished. For a while, it looked like he might lose the election. But then, Union armies won several big victories in places like Atlanta. The people saw that the end of the war was near. Lincoln was re-elected with a large majority. He was very happy because it meant the people still trusted him to lead them to peace. In his second inaugural speech, in March 1865, Lincoln did not talk about victory or revenge. He talked about healing. He said the famous words, "With malice toward none, with charity for all." He wanted to bring the South back into the country with kindness. He did not want to punish them. He wanted to bind up the nation's wounds. He was already thinking about how to build schools and houses for the formerly enslaved people. He wanted to help the whole country grow together. His heart was full of hope for the first time in many long years. Chapter 5. The Final Curtain and the Eternal Flame. By April 1865, the war was almost over. The Confederate capital of Richmond had fallen. The great Confederate General Robert E. Lee surrendered his army to Union General Ulysses S. Grant. The news spread like wildfire. People danced in the streets and sang songs of joy. Lincoln visited Richmond and sat in the chair of the Confederate leader. He did not boast. He only looked tired and relieved. He went back to Washington to plan for the future. He wanted to make sure that the rights of all citizens were protected by the law. He was finally happy. On the night of April the 14th, 1865, Lincoln went to Ford's Theater in Washington. He went to see a funny play called Our American Cousin. He wanted to have a night of relaxation with his wife, Mary. While the play was happening, a man named John Wilkes Booth crept into the president's box. Booth was an actor who hated Lincoln and blamed him for the South's defeat. He shot the president with a small pistol. Lincoln fell forward and never woke up again. He was carried to a house across the street, where he died the next morning. The nation that had just started to celebrate was suddenly plunged into deep mourning. The news of Lincoln's death shocked the world. A train carried his body from Washington all the way back to his home in Springfield, Illinois. Millions of people lined the tracks to say goodbye. They cried and waved flags. Even people who had disagreed with him now realized that a great man was gone. He had saved the Union. He had ended slavery. He had given his life for his country. His funeral was one of the largest in history. He was buried in a beautiful tomb in Springfield, where a tall monument now stands toward the sky. His life had been a long journey from a log cabin to the highest office in the land. Abraham Lincoln's legacy lives on in every part of modern life. He showed that a person from a humble background can achieve great things through hard work and honesty. He proved that democracy can survive even the darkest times. His face is on the penny and the $5 bill. His giant statue sits in a marble temple in Washington, D.C., looking out over the city. But his true monument is the freedom of millions of people. He was a man of peace who had to lead a war. He was a man of humor who carried a heavy sadness. He was the great emancipator. When we think about Lincoln today, we remember his patience and his wisdom. He was not a perfect man, but he was a man who never stopped growing. He listened to his critics. He changed his mind when he saw he was wrong. He always tried to do what was right, even when it was very difficult. He showed us that words have the power to change history. He showed us that kindness is a form of strength. His story is a story of hope for anyone who feels small or unimportant. He teaches us that we can all make a difference in our own way. The world has changed much since the 1860s. We have technology and machines that Lincoln could never have imagined. But the problems he faced are still with us in many ways. We still struggle with fairness and equality. We still look for leaders who are honest and brave. Lincoln's life is like a map that shows us how to navigate through hard times. He reminds us to treat our neighbors with respect. He reminds us to keep our promises. Most importantly, he reminds us that the work of freedom is never truly finished. It is a flame that we must all keep burning. As we look back on the tall, thin man from Kentucky, we see a hero of the human spirit. He fought through poverty, loss, and war to create a better world. He left behind a country that was whole and a people that were free. His journey was difficult, but his destination was glory. He will always be remembered as one of the greatest leaders in human history. His words still echo in the halls of power and in the hearts of children. He belongs not just to America, but to the whole world. He is a symbol of what is possible when we lead with love and truth. What do you think was Abraham Lincoln's most important quality? Was it his honesty, his courage, or his ability to forgive those who fought against him? How can we apply the lessons of his life to the challenges we face in our own world today? Could a man like Lincoln succeed in the fast world of today, or was he a special gift for a specific moment in time?